Hello, Darlings and Darklings, and welcome to the Simply Witchery podcast. I'm your host, Lofi, they, them. I'm a queer witch, pagan, amateur herbalist, and tarot reader. Here at Simply Witchery, I discuss magic, ritual, herbs, tarot, and so much more. This week, we're going to do a deep dive with the Empress and the tarot. Join me as we discuss this beautiful card and the light she shines on the tarot as a whole. Hello, it's good to be back here with you. It's been a really long time since I've done one of these, so let me remind you of how they work. Every deep dive will have one card that will be our main focus. I take that card and go through all of the other cards and open up to divinity, intuition, my personal deities and guides to show me how they all connect. I can't go over all of them, so I'll bring you the highlights of my meditation and speak what messages I'm given. As always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. My perspective may not perfectly align with yours, and that's okay and to be expected. Use this as a jumping off point to build your own relationship with tarot. With this particular episode, I want to be clear that while I use a lot of gendered language to talk about the Empress, these energies are not confined or defined by the biological sex or gender expression or the gender binary at all. It's merely another imperfect lens which we view and describe the tarot through. For the Empress, we'll walk the Fool's Path through her lens and then talk about her relationship with her major arcana number family and her key contributors from the minor arcana. The Empress in her own right is a vision of wild, untamed creation. It is through her that chance and the unexpected are brought into the world. As the archetypal polarity of the Emperor in all his perfectly controlled divine organization, she is an abundance that is found in the chaos of nature and the beauty of the things that we work well with, even when it seems like they shouldn't work very well for us. She is the creator and the incubator of life. She gives us permission to be and to create in a space without rules or structure or judgment of any kind. She cares little for the morality or the usefulness of the creation and instead prizes the process of creation above all else. Perfection, structure, and morality are gifts and tools offered to her to make real the wholeness that we find at the end of the Fool's journey. She takes quite an interesting path on this journey and provides part of the great whole that will become the world. So let's get started by looking at her journey. We start, of course, at the beginning with the Fool, the Magician, and the High Priestess. These are three components that, when mixed into one, become the Empress herself. The Fool is her raw possibility to do and create anything. The Magician is the raw kinetic energy within her, the ability to affect change in a very real, tangible way. And finally, in the Priestess, we find her connection with the wild and the unknowable knowledge of the divine whole. The cards that come before her are components of her, and so everything that follows her in the majors are components that she creates. We can look at her and see where those components become her power, her downfall, and the tools she uses to reach the world. I'm going to go a little rapid fire here, but I think it's important that I touch on all of these things. In the Emperor, we find her perfect partner and her archetypal foil. He gives her the gift of just enough structure to keep her safe and whole, to avoid overextending and draining her pure creative essence. The Hierophant is the unification of the Emperor and the Empress on the most basic level. They're a person who thrives within the structures around them and has the ability and the power to connect with the unknowable and the wild magic of existence as a result of that structure. So the two have created a third, and the third then seeks to find its own partner and foil that it's seen in its creators. That connection is represented by the lovers. When that connection is nurtured, it allows for the forward motion of the chariot and the personal power that we find in strength for the individual. Now, the next couple of cards are tools of the Empress and the ways in which she protects her power from those that would take it from her. The Hermit provides isolation and the ability to have personal clarity on thoughts, feelings, and values, so the Empress can create abundance on an individual level. The wheel provides the ability to go with the flow and trust divine movement and cycles. In this, she takes control by releasing the need to control everything and allowing the current to guide the way she paddles for the greatest efficiency. With these tools at her disposal, the Empress and the divine protector in her and in all of us are able to see justice done in the world by nurturing and creating the ability to be vulnerable and emotional and feel powerful and strong because of that vulnerability and emotion. This is how the Empress affects the individual. And now we move on to how she moves through collective energy. There are two options here: to follow the Hanged One, death, and temperance, or to fall into the traps of the devil and reap its consequences in the tower. The Hanged One is the shift of perspective that allows her to connect with the structures of the Emperor and to see their value while they are in balance with her chaotic wildness. This is where she finds the ability to connect with things that are unknown to her and different than her wild instincts. Death is her ability to release what no longer serves the highest good of all and allows her to create space not just for herself, but for the divine whole, without making herself small or giving anything up for its sake. With temperance, the Empress learns to coexist as a separate, distinct entity that can co-create as equals within partnerships. This is unlike the unity in the Hierophant because each member of the group is still wholly themselves, but able to give to a cause without making compromises in terms of their values and identity. When this is achieved, the world, as a card, has the potential to come into existence. The Devil's Path leads the Empress down the path of toxic individualism. Wild power and unfettered freedom are all well and good, but when one loses sight of how the self is interconnected with everyone and everything around us and in the world at large, we lose the greatest strength of the Empress as an archetype. We lose her nurturing, healing, loving spirit that brings sustenance and abundance to everyone who is blessed enough to enjoy her presence. The individual, cut off from the divine whole, is doomed to create only for creation's sake. And while that is beautiful, it is only a part of the process, and without the rest of that process, it is ultimately meaningless. The tower is the forceful breaking of the cycle by destroying the joys of solitude and freedom. Here, her joy and freedom are so closely guarded that it circles all the way back to rigidity and an unwillingness to change or compromise. Here, she is cut off from collective creativity, which is a massive part of her power. The star is always an invitation to healing, and it is here that the wounds of the devil and the tower are given an opportunity to be healed. The moon offers pure truths to the Empress as a gift to allow death to do its job unhindered, and to make changes in order to facilitate judgment-free creativity on a societal level that the Empress previously was only able to achieve on an individual level. The sun is a return to the perfect joining in the quartet that we explored in the beginning of the journey. It's a mixing and a joining not only of the Empress and the Emperor, but now also the Hierophant and the lovers. In this relationship, all can both join together to see judgment done as a whole and as individuals. This is where the Empress sees justice turn to judgment by exercising her powers as a divine protector, and where justice is finally perfectly realized on an individual, societal, and global scale. This group must also be able to join together completely and perfectly, co-mingling to create the perfect perfection that is the World card. So before we move on to the minors, I also want to touch on the Empress's number family. She's number 3 in the major arcana, and so her number family consists of herself, the Hanged One, and the World. This is part of why I referenced the World so much during our walk down the Fool's Journey. She is numerically connected to the World on a deep level. She uses the perspective of the Hanged One to facilitate change and creation, to bring abundance into life on an individual, societal, and global level. So that closes our talk about the Empress's walk on the Fool's Path. Now, let's move on to the tools she has in the minors that help her walk this path. For For the Empress, I feel that each minor suit has an overall message for us, so we'll go over those, and then we'll also touch on the aces, the court cards from each suit, because I feel like those have a really important individual message for us as well. So let's go over the overall messages from the suits. The wands are the tools of movement and progress that the Empress uses to build abundance. From the wands, she is able to push forward and breathe new life into whatever she's creating. If something isn't functional in her creative process, she changes the process with the help of the wands. The pentacles are her raw materials, the physical building blocks she uses to create new things and expand on her abundance. If the wands are spiritual forward motion, the pentacles are that motion being done in the physical world around us. The swords are always associated with mental clarity, and in the context of the Empress, this clarity is what allows the pentacles to be organized in the most efficient way to create and facilitate wild creation. The Empress is at her best when she has just enough structure to keep her wild, untamed creation perpetually going, and the swords are the tools that she uses to facilitate that within herself. Finally, the cups are the tools she uses to feel safe and comfortable enough to be vulnerable in her creation. This is where creation becomes art that requires a willingness and a vulnerability within ourselves, with our co-creators, and the world at large when we share our creations. For the Empress, wands are spiritual motion, pentacles are raw, physical material, swords are mental clarity and fortitude to take action, and the cups are the emotional strength that creation requires. Those are the overall messages from the suits. Let's move on to the aces. If you've listened to the podcast before, you have often heard me refer to the aces as seeds. They have their unique energy that grows a different plant, and in the context of the Empress, they definitely are doing that. The Ace of Wands is the base energy you need to feed new growth. So it's like the potential inside of a seed to grow a whole plant. The Pentacles are, again, raw materials that use the energy of the wands to expand something. And then the swords give us a reason to grow the thing at all, because they give us a clarity of purpose and the mental fortitude it takes to be patient enough to create, because you are capable of seeing the big picture or the long game, whatever it may be at the time. And then the Ace of Cups gives the creation meaning. It's through our emotions often that we give things value. And I think for the Empress, there's a lot of emotion there, and so the emotion or how she applies the most value to things. Alright, to the court cards, we're going to start with the pages. The pages are our innocence and naivety. Naivety is not a negative. It is often given that connotation in our society, but it is not in fact a bad thing. So, with the pages, each suit brings its own newness, freshness to creativity and creation that keeps its meaning evolving. It makes it continuously useful, and most importantly always, a joyful act. So in the Page of Wands, we're reminded, the Empress is reminded, to not get stuck in doing and creating the same thing over and over and over and over again. Variety is the spice of life, and the Empress needs that because the Emperor is more quality over quantity, and the Empress is a little more quantity over quality. So the Page of Pentacles is a call to randomly and wildly plant things, to see what grows from the fertile ground that the Empress just naturally has access to because of her innate ability of just being her. So the journey through the Fool's Path helps us build that natural fertile ground. And then the Page of Pentacles is just a call to put out whatever you want to put out and see what thrives from that. And then the Page of Swords asks us to remember that as we create, all creation is good creation. Whatever you make will be good enough, and perfectly imperfect. So it's a call to be proud of whatever is made, as every project teaches you something, and that learning process makes you a better creator in the long run. So everything has value. Nothing is invaluable. And then the Page of Cups brings us to innocent intuition. Here, there's space to facilitate creation unhindered by the wounds that are often inflicted on us by the imperfect world around us and the people in it. It's the vulnerability that creation requires. It's bravery in the face of potential rejection or whatever it is that we're afraid of. The Page of Cups embraces that bravery to the fullest. So solid in their self and their feelings that other people's feelings about what they're doing doesn't really matter to them. So the Knights are next. In them, we find a natural motion towards our goals as creators, especially in the context of the Empress. So the Knight of Wands is new directions and different approaches. It's the fun of finding what works in a given situation. It's creative experimentation for the sake of experimenting. The Knight of Pentacles is the bravery that's required to create new things. It wants growth, a nurturing energy, and abundance above all other things. Creating new things is often scary, and the Pentacles is based in reality, especially this night. It's based in reality and seeing what might potentially happen and doing what you need to do or what you want to do in spite of what might happen because of it. So the Knight of Swords is thoughtful action. It's action that births the brilliant breakthroughs. We have those aha moments, those lightning bolt thoughts that completely change our creative process and helps us find out-of-the-box solutions, which are also the Empress's wheelhouse. She's not about structure. She's not about doing everything the same way every time. She's about innovation. And the Knight of Swords is that mental innovation of being able to draw yourself out of stale patterns or patterns that could work better or could be more interesting, could be more fun for you to do. So that's the Knight of Swords. And finally, the Knight of Cups is the bravery we need to lean into the healing aspects of creation. It is through growth and the motion of all the Knights that we facilitate the healing of the self, of society, of the world at large. It's movement that lets us heal those old wounds, and the Knights, in some way, all bring that to us. So next is the Queens. In the Queens, we find emotional wisdom of a lot of different kinds, and the call to use their specific energies to incubate new life and new opportunities to create with and for the collective. It's in these queens that we find the most nurturing tools of the Empress. And certainly the most intuitive-based ones, the most emotionally based ones. Even the Queen of Swords has a emotional maturity to her from me. And she's probably the least emotive of all the queens, in my opinion. The Queen of Wands is a card that I often refer to as the Empress of the Minors. She is the embodiment of the divine creator, the divine protector, that are facets of the Empress. She's fiercely loyal, and she has the desire to grow the things that she cares about and what the divine whole needs to create and survive and thrive. Next is the Queen of Pentacles. The Queen of Pentacles is the embodiment of the wisdom it takes to create new things. This is where we find the connection to the physical and the unknowable, esoteric, intuitive parts of the physical world around us, which might seem a little counterintuitive, but the earth is alive as much as we are, and it's leaning into that earthy knowledge that we as human beings who live on this earth have and have been, I think, largely cut off from, and it's coming back to that old knowledge that we've lost. And then The Queen of Swords brings us the mental maturity to create. She reminds us that just because someone thinks it or feels it doesn't make it true. So self-criticism and the unsolicited criticism of others has no place in our own personal creative process. This is kind of where we connect to the Empress's unending acceptance of what is being creative and what is being created, and how those things are, without judging them or giving them any value that comes from outside of yourself and your creative process. So rounding up the queens is the Queen of Cups. It embodies the emotional maturity we need to make deep connections with ourselves and our feelings, and to nurture a willingness to be vulnerable and honest as creators, individually, and with the people around us that are co-creators in our life, because no one is isolated 100%. There is some other living thing in everybody's life. So there are always co-creators around us that we have to learn to be vulnerable and honest with in order to create abundance and in order to create things as part of the whole, especially the divine whole. And finally, we come to the last section, and we're going to look at the kings for the tools that we need to truly practice the teachings of the Empress. The King of Wands is a raw force of will, leadership, optimistic views of the world, for the short-term future particularly. I think the long-term picture of things comes more from the King of Swords, but we'll get to him. In the King of Pentacles, we find tenacity, patience, and the ability to commit to more of the long-term process of creation. The King of Swords is the mental fortitude we need to see the long-term picture that the King of Pentacles supports. So it's the ability to commit to being an eternal student of the Empress's wild and ever-changing creative force. It's being comfortable in change and in knowing that everything changes all the time. And that can be a little uncomfortable for most of us, I would say. But it's finding the comfort in that change that the King of Swords mental awareness brings to us. And then lastly, the King of Cups brings us our ability to discern the right time and place and people to be vulnerable with. The deep vulnerability of creation is a beautiful thing to share. It is super important to the Empress. I would say just as important to the creation that she manifests, that we protect that vulnerability and that softness that we cultivate within ourselves. So she's not out here asking you to just be vulnerable with that stranger you meet on the street. She's out here asking you to be intentionally vulnerable with people that you trust and love and have proven themselves worthy of that vulnerability. And I think that's really the key to truly leaning in to the Empress in the healthiest possible way. It's not about just creating for creation's sake and creating for the divine whole and creating for yourself. It's about finding the space to be vulnerable, to create a good life with the people that you have around you. And that is a lifelong process. And that can be beautiful, but when you're vulnerable with people who have not earned it, that's where you can get into trouble. And I think that sums up the Empress card and her journey through the entire tarot. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Let me know what your thoughts are on this perspective of the Empress. And as always, another reminder to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Thank you again for listening, darlings and darklings. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it. It really helps me out. You can find more from me on social media at Simply Witchery everywhere. Check me out for readings and more magical content. The music in this episode is provided by Lofi Girl. May blessings, joy, and love find you wherever you are. I'll see you next time.